So far, we have added a lot of sprites in our game scene editor, and what we cannot do yet is to work with those sprites in code. But how can we actually do that? That is something that I'd like to show you right now. If you remember, when we created those tracks, we have named them depending on their position. So this was the track 0, track 1, and so on. And this is our target, and we have named them using the name property in the attributes inspector. And this name is actually the way to access these sprites from our code. And to do that and to show you how that works, I'd like to go into the game scene.swift file. And here we still have a lot of template code that was created by Xcode. So I'm going to start by removing this template code, almost all of it, by starting with the private properties right below the class definition. Then I'm removing everything that is currently placed in the didMoveToView function. And then I'm also going to remove all of the other functions remaining except for the update function. We're going to cover the update function in a later video. But the didMoveToView function is cool because this function is pretty similar to viewDidLoad in UIKit and is called as soon as our scene is presented by the SKView. So we can use that in a second, but for now we want to deal with our tracks, and we're going to start by adding a property that is going to hold that's going to be a tracks array, and this array is going to hold all of our tracks, and this is going to be an array of SK sprite nodes, which is going to be optional, and we can directly initialize that by placing an SK sprite node into some brackets and initializing it with some parentheses. And to actually load all of our sprites from our scene editor into this array, I'd like to create a specific function for that, calling it setupTracks. We do not need any parameters here, and we're using a simple for loop. So we're looping through our tracks, which is from 0 to 8, and we check if we can get a track. So I create an if-let statement here with a constant track, and now I'm using self and calling child node with name. And this function of our game scene looks for sprites or child nodes with specific name, and here we of course insert the counter variable I, because we've started to name our tracks starting with 0 and increasing the number until we reach 8, and then we can convert that into an SK sprite node, and we should get 8 tracks or 9 tracks that we can use. And then all we need to do is use our tracks array and append each of those tracks, and we should be done. And if we now call our setupTrack function, or setupTracks function in didMoveToView, we can actually use afterwards the tracks array, access the first element, and maybe change the color to UI color, let's say green, and see if that works. And I'm going to run this in the iPhone 7 simulator. So let's open up the simulator, and indeed our first line has now a green color. So just to quickly recap what we did, we created a tracks array that is supposed to hold all of the sprites or the track sprites that we added to our game scene in the editor. We are creating a setupTracks function and iterating through each of those elements here in our game scene. We're starting with 0, counting up from 0 to 8, going through all of these child nodes actually by using the child node with name function of the game scene. We're converting then each of these child nodes to an SK sprite node and add them to our tracks array. And because we did that, and after we called the setupTracks function in didMoveToView, we can access the first element of our tracks array and simply change the color or do whatever else we actually want to do with our tracks.